Hey guys, thank you for stopping by. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. And I hope you enjoyed this interview. All right, welcome back to the program. My guests are with me here, and I will start the first introduction with Mr. Adewale Oyerinde, who is the Director General at NECA. Welcome to you, sir, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having us once again.
You're welcome. All right, Comrade Peter Esele is joining us also, but virtually he is the former president, Trade Union Congress, that's TUC, and we're looking at, of course, like I mentioned at the beginning, minimum wage expectations versus reality, because the minimum wage issue is still a topical one. So DG, welcome. I would start with you. Last week, on Friday, of course, I discussed this a bit extensively, but this is another angle to it, because to every conversation, there are many sides to it.
Absolutely.
The meeting with the Mr. President last week, it was just organized labor and the federal government. There's supposed to be a tripartite committee made up of organized labor, federal government, and yourselves,
organized private sector.
But the organized private sector was not represented in that meeting. So the optics is that labor and government negotiated on their own without you guys being in the room and told you guys that the new minimum wage is 70K. Though I saw, I don't know if it was a statement from you or from NECA that says, oh, they are okay with what the president said. So I wanted you to clarify that you're supposed to be in the room because a tripartite committee is supposed to be in that meeting with the president. Then at the end of the day, you guys now say, okay, oh, we agree with, is it because of the president or so? So what exactly happened?
Well, and thank you once again for raising this issue. And there are two issues in one that you've raised. The first one is the understanding of the institutional framework for certain conversations. You know, in this ecosystem, there is the provision for the tripartite, and there is the provision for the bipartite. So where there are bipartite conversation between two parties, it is okay, allowable. But within the context of the national minimum wage, it ordinarily should be the tripartite. And if you remember, on the 30th of January, the tripartite committee was inaugurated. And conversation was held back and forth at the committee level. And the committee was to make a recommendation to the president. And the president was to, using his best judgment, looking at all the variables, to either accept the recommendation of the committee or make a pronouncement about the figures within the range that was agreed. That was the pattern in 2019 when the state governors had a figure in mind, private sector had a figure in mind, and then there was a consensus between the organized private sector and labor on 30,000. So 30,000 was passed to for the federal government with a definitive note on the minority report that the state governors said they cannot pay this figure. Now the president approved 30,000. Now for this context now, our expectation, our real sincere expectation was that when those conversations was going on, especially as it will affect the recommended figure, then the private sector should be part of it. That conversation, the whole conversation about the minimum wage should be driven by the tripartite. You know, we are worried that political solutions are being brought in consistently to disrupt the context of tripartism. You know, we are worried about that. You know, there are institutions that have been created. If there are disputes in the land between an employer and an employee, we have the Trade Dispute Act to resolve all these issues. We have the National Industrial Court as institutions in our ecosystem, in our labor and industrial relations ecosystem, that are meant to address many, many issues. So our concern is this. Once we keep bringing political solutions to resolve issues in the labor and industrial relations ecosystem, we are invariably weakening those institutions that we have created for ourselves to resolve those issues. We had hoped that the organized private sector would be called to also share his perspective within the context of the 70,000 that the president announced.
So why did you not agree? Did you agree? Because why did you not agree? Why did I say, okay, that NECA is okay with 70K, now, if you feel this way?
Now, this is our position at the organized private sector level. You know, when we came to the point of 62,000 in at the committee level, the 62,000 was not a frivolous figure. It wasn't just a figure off our head. You know, there were a lot of analysis that was done we actually went to the sectors, the sectoral groups, where negotiation actually takes place, and look at what exactly can the sectoral groups pay, looking at the current economic situation. Now, once we got everything that the sectoral group could pay, then you look at the first quartile of it. You look at the modal of it. What is the figure that everybody can pay without compromising those that can pay? We are talking of the minimum now. And that was what we got to 62,000. And we, in good faith, shared some level of concern with the representative of the government then. We also gave them a list of the support that organized private sector we need to enable us to meet up with this with the payment of 62,000. So our joy, if joy is the appropriate word, or what tempered the concern was the call by the president that is going to support organized private sector and the subnationals to enhance their capacity to pay.
And I wonder what that support means.
Yeah, that is the next point of our conversation.
If that support will be monetary or political or just by mouth,
no,
just by talking.
We actually sent, we shared the list, and we believe strongly, or we want to believe, that the president was referring to the exchange we've had with representatives of the federal government at the committee level.
Okay, comrade, I'll come to you in just a minute, but let me still stick with you because these are issues that we need to iron out. Now, in terms of support, which the president mentioned last week, that it will support states and organized private sector. You actually canvassed with Labour earlier, to Labour as in 62K, isn't it? Now the federal government and Labour has agreed to 70K without you guys being in the room. So they added additional 8K. So the support now, is it that the support should come in the form of the 8,000 naira to private sector to be able to pay? Do you understand what I'm saying?
I do,
yes,
I
that
do.
8K, or what kind of support are you asking the federal government, since the president has said it, what kind of support are you asking the federal government to
give?
Yes.
Now, this is
and
support.
you mentioned the list, sorry, pardon me. You mentioned the list earlier that you had, so I would like to know what that list is
The support
about.
is simple. They're not pecuniary. And to show our commitment that we are not, the private sector is not the demon or the profit Shylock that most people have termed us. Basically, the support we requested then, and we are still requesting, is basically to make the operating environment more hospitable, to ensure that the cost of doing business reduces proportionately. Because if the cost of doing business doesn't reduce, let the minimum wage be 200,000, let it be 300,000. The high cost of production will eat off whatever figure you have. So the call was, look, let's government do the needful to enable the organized private sector to breathe more. And we requested for the recent astronomical increase in electricity tariff, which has increased the cost of energy by over thousands. So government should take a critical look at that figure and find a way to either abolish it or reduce it. We talk of a freeze on new levies, taxes across the three tiers of government. Those are noble requests that we think the government should give, and so many other lists, so many other simple and achievable requests that the organized private sector has made to the government.
Okay. Let me bring in Comrade Esele here. Comrade Esele, thank you for your patience. I needed to iron this out with the DG of NECA. But walk me through your reaction when you got that news last week, just a few days ago, about 70K minimum wage. Edo State Governor, of course, mentioned earlier that Edo State will pay 70K minimum wage. So he's one of the states that would pay at that. Then also walk me through the way you think, the first question which I asked the DG, around organized private sector not being in the room, and walk me through also your experience as a labor leader then in your days, and how 70K has been reached now.
Nancy, good morning. And one of the things that has been done here is these are normal routes of negotiation. Labour asking for over 200,000. First, it was as high as 700, and then coming down to about 200 and over 200,000. Now, you and I think we've had that conversation both formally or informally, that 200,000 naira is actually not feasible. And then when I heard that 70,000 naira had been agreed, first was that of, initially I was surprised, but again, I also had to walk the line and find out walk the contact and find out that, yes, looking at the happenings in the country. That may be what I'll call just a temporary thing at the moment, because if you look at even if you are paid 200,000, the environment right now is that inflation is going to eat it up. I'll take you back when we had 18,000 naira, 18,000 naira as minimum wage. It was equivalent to $120 a month. Now you have 70,000 naira as minimum wage, and it's less than $50. If we are to go by 1,500 as 1,500 to the dollar. So what you have is that the quantity has increased, but the quality has not. Or if I'm to paraphrase in economic terms, your purchasing power has reduced, even though in writing, your finances has increased. So what we have to do is that if there's no omnibus plan, when I use the word omnibus plan, is between the federal, the state, and the local government. No matter what you pay, is going to be eroded. And after all, even the workers we are talking about, NSC, TUC, they are less than 10% of the working population. So what do you expect government to do, or what is my expectation of government to do to make sure that every Nigerian is a beneficiary of what is going on? Is that the various factors of production are looked into. Yes, the DG NECA made reference to an environment, a hospitable environment for private sector to drive. But you also need an hospitable environment for the average Nigerian to drive. You and I know how costly how costly it is to go to the market and make any purchases right now. And the reason is because you have insecurity that makes it difficult for farmers to produce. So when we talk about the factors and cost of production, it's a composite. And if we want to eradicate or ameliorate or mitigate whatever is affecting Nigerians right now, is that we have to have that factor whereby we make sure that everything is symbiotic between the federal, the state, and the local government, and everybody playing their role. Now, see, it's not the responsibility of federal government to provide transport. I live in Lagos. Tinubu is in Abuja. It's not Tinubu's business to make sure that I'm able to move from point A to point B. It's the responsibility of the Lagos state government. It's the responsibility of Edo state government. I came in from Delta yesterday. It's the responsibility of Delta state government to make all of that available. So, but once you don't have a plan, there is no plan in both state and local government to make sure that these are available. Healthcare is also the responsibility of state. Local government also have its role. So until we have an omnibus plan to know that economic indices are driven not by theory, they are not driven by ad hoc measures, they are driven by system and processes. Economics or the economy does not reward or punish you. What the economy does to you is that the economy shows you the result of the decisions that you are taking. So when you are facing hard times, it's as a result of the choices that you've made. And the various choices that whether this administration, past administration have been making, is that they've been looking at the economy based on ad hoc. We wake up today, we are going to give 1 million naira to do this, or we are going to construct road from Lagos to Maduguri. What are the bases? Where is the money coming from? How are we spending this money? How is it going to stimulate the economy? What are the number of people that will be employed? That is how I know that people think in terms of economy. But that is not the way we operate. I'm just going to look at the civilian from 1999 to date, majority of what we do in Nigeria is ad hoc. So minimum wage or no minimum wage, create the environment that makes it easier for the purchasing power of the naira so that people can go to the market and buy what they want to buy. If you are paying me 50,000 and I know that I can get free healthcare, that's what happened in Nordic countries. I know I can get free healthcare. My children can go to school. I want to get a transport. I'm going by transport, and there are various tiers of transport. So whichever one I can afford is easier for me to get in. But when you don't have any of these in place, you are going to have strife.
Okay.
And then the second question asks me
Yeah.
about tripartite and what have you. I know the DG of NECA is probably he just want to say things based on the way it should be done. The DG of NECA, based on his position, must have an inkling that 70,000 naira was coming.
DG, did you have an inkling? He just posed the question to you.
Well, I will maybe the comrade president we avail us his intelligence network to know all these things. But basically, we weren't will not dwell on the rumor part of it. You know, I think it's more credible to hear the president say things which you can now position yourself to respond to, basically.
Okay. But let me still stick with Comrade. There's this confusion around wage and salary, and perhaps DG will also talk about it, that what we operate in Nigeria is a salary structure. Everybody gets paid, at least most people get paid at the end of the month. Wages are for perhaps blue-collar jobs and some other kind of jobs. So I don't know if that confusion will be laid to rest, because at the end of the month now, what a worker is entitled to is 70K. So I would like you to speak on that, really.
Yes, what don't forget is minimum. What we have now, when they say minimum wage, the fact is that this is an entry point. So if anybody is coming to the system right now, this is the entry point. And if you look at majority of Nigerian workers right now, you will be surprised. I'll give credit to the organized private sector for that. You are going to find out that organized private sector, you are not going to have probably maybe 20% or 30% of that part of that sector will be paying 70,000. So you are going to have people who have moved beyond that 70,000. What you have now is that if you are looking at the informal sector, the major benefit is also going to go to the informal sector if it is enforced. By that, I mean domestic staff in houses, those in the gas stations. Those are people, even the bus conductor, those are people that are likely majorly going to benefit. And then the others, you are looking at service structure whereby you are going to have a scaling, but what that can be negotiated, whereby in the past you have people who feel that, oh, if minimum wage was 30,000, now it's going to be 70,000. So I too should get 100%. I don't think that is going to happen. So the major point here is that this is an entry point. You can pay more than 70,000. I know some state governors were saying they cannot pay 70,000, but they can pay more than 70,000. If a state like Edo is paying 70,000, I know Enugu had already agreed that whatever is agreed by the tripartite, that they will pay. But what I want to say is that, fine, it's also good to have tripartite to meet, and it's also good to have institutions that are strengthened. Thank you.
Comrade, I don't know if you really answered my question, because my question is around the definition of wage. And perhaps I should come to the DG for that, because what I know that organized private sector pays is salaries. So I don't know, as the president transmits this bill to the National Assembly, if that can also be worked on, because the definition of a wage is either per piece work, or you earn hourly, daily, or weekly. So I don't know how to calculate this, because what it means, literally speaking, is 70K wage, minimum wage. That means perhaps is it hourly or weekly work? Or now, should I now divide 70,000 divided by 20 working days, or in a month, 30, to give me how much I'm worth an hour? I hope you understand what I mean. So literally.
Now, we don't have it. What we have majorly, if we want to break down that wage, we don't have it. It just doesn't exist. We don't pay weekly. And what you even have is that even if you are getting the worker by the roadside to work for you, which of course is what you pay the worker, is a wage, is based on what you agreed on. So what we operate majorly in Nigeria is salary.
It's salary. So why say wage? Okay, did you?
Well, you know, the convention that birthed this, Convention 131 of the ILO, is a minimum wage setting convention. And what the current reality has brought to us, you know, because for me and for us in the organized private sector, you know, this experience should give us the opportunity to have certain conversation that we've not had before.
Exactly.
Certain conversation about wages, certain conversation about salaried work, certain conversation about minimum wage, certain conversation about, look, is it not important now? Is it not time for us to actually implement this concept of minimum wage, where an employee has the opportunity to work with 2 or 3 employers? I can say, look, I'm working 3 hours, 4 hours, or 5 hours here. Then once I'm done, I move somewhere else. That is how it is done in Europe, in America, in countries where they actually implement minimum wage. But we have so lumped up the conversation that you know, you find it difficult to separate the two. And the same thing happened to the concept of the living wage.
Living wage.
So at the point, people were throwing in the concept of living wage, and so look, What the law we are inaugurated to address, to review, is the National Minimum Wage Act. Living wage, employers at the global level, we believe minimum living wage is desirable now. But there's no real framework at the global level to set a living wage. And I will also share this. In February this year, at the ILO level, the Committee on Wage, they met, including labor at the global level, employers at the global level, with the ILO, to decide a framework for a living wage. That framework was agreed in February. It was presented to the governing body of ILO in March, and the ILO governing body approved that framework. That now, let's start conversation about a globally accepted framework for us to set living wage. So we have mobbed up living wage. Sometimes people call it living wage. They call it living minimum wage. Sometimes people call this salary. We call it wages.
Exactly.
I think this has given us the opportunity to come back. Once the heat is off and we get back to implementation, which is the next phase of the discussion, then I think it's very important for the Ministry of Labour and the tripartite to champion this conversation. For the next negotiation, what are we looking at? Okay. Salary, wages, or what exactly are we doing? And lastly for me, the president have addressed two issues. Well, there are 5 components in the context of the law itself. The first one is the figure that has been announced, 70,000. The second one is the duration that the president announced, 3 years. 3 years. Then there is exceptions.
Exactly.
Those that will be exempted from it, I think the battle will be taken to the National Assembly during the public hearing. There is violations, and also there is penalties. So those 3 has not been addressed, and we believe strongly that probably the president has acceded to the recommendation of the tripartite committee in those contexts. But definitely, those 3 items will go to the National Assembly for us to continue the conversation.
Okay, so let's quickly take a break. When we come back, we'll take a look at the issue of compliance, that's implementation perhaps of the minimum wage, at least for organized private sector in the context of inflation, in the context of high production cost, and perhaps those that will also be exempted. I talked about that on Friday, that not everybody is entitled to a minimum. This 70K now, I did talk about it extensively on Friday, but let's quickly take a commercial break. We'll be right back. Comrades, still stick with us. We'll also be back.
We are passionate about 2 things in Nigeria. The first is football. The second is our rice. And nobody celebrates like a Nigerian. So, for every goal scored, every mark made, you can be sure to always come back home to rice. Celebrate with Nigerian Premium Big Bull Rice, homegrown just like you. Big Bull Rice, tasty rice, nourished you.
All right, welcome back. My guest still with me, Comrade Peter Esele, former president, TUC, joining us virtually, as well as Mr. Adewale Oyerinde, DG at the NECA. All right, DG, over to you. I asked the question earlier about compliance level, exemption, and perhaps the issue of productivity. How, because productivity is not even being discussed in all of this. It's all about just give us the money, make we dey go, things hard, you know. But you also need to look at productivity because the economy will either gain or suffer.
Absolutely.
I don't know who is doing that calculation. So over to you.
Well, for us, I think we've reached out to ourselves, between us and organized labor, and the need for us to work together first to ensure compliance. It's one thing for you to have a law. It's one thing for you for people to comply. And really, you cannot legislate compliance, because once you legislate compliance, then you are also forced to create and empower institutions that will enforce it, which is another leakage in your system. So for us, consensus compliance based on consensus and mutual understanding is what we are building with organized labor. We are committed to making sure this works. As Comrade Esele said, in the private sector, over 60, 70, 80% of private sector is already complied with 30,000. And we're also committed to making this work, trusting that the government will also show its commitment to support the organized private sector. But the issue of compliance will be a big elephant in the room consistently. And as I said earlier, we're also open to collaborate with the Ministry of Labour, to partner with organized labor to ensure maximum compliance on these issues. On the issue of exceptions, we have also tabled our recommendation to the tripartite, noting that SMEs, SMEs are basically the engine, the drivers of this economy. And an average SME is struggling. It's really standing on one leg. Kudos to Smedan. Kudos to Smedan for the work it's doing. Kudos to the support that SMEs are receiving across board. But those support need to be deepened for SMEs to actually find their feet in this economy. So rather than burden them with the issue of the minimum wage, I think we'll find a way around it and put them within the context of those exceptions so that we allow that critical sector of the economy to grow, and then they can meet up with those issues. Those recommendations we have made to the tripartite committee, and we're hoping it will be favorably looked at when the bill gets to the National Assembly.
Okay, comrade, let me come to you and ask you the question around how do you think this will impact Nigeria's job market moving forward? Because this 70K, at least for government or even the workers in Nigeria, I'm not sure up to 20 million people will benefit when this is implemented. So how do you think that this would impact the job market? DG just also spoke about MSMEs make up, or SMEs rather, the engine of growth in Nigeria, provide 84% of jobs and 96% employment. I spoke with the DG of Smedan last week here on the show, that I think on Thursday. So how do you think that we can measure perhaps also productivity and the job market moving forward? What quality of jobs will we now see in Nigeria as a result of perhaps increased minimum wage?
I think one of the SMEs are not going to be part of it, because if I'm also talking from experience. I know in the past there was a time to say if you are employing workers less than 50, you are exempted, and I think they have to drop it lower than that or even increase it higher. So if you do that, the SMEs will not be burdened with new minimum wage. The other aspect of it is that I'm not too disturbed that it's going to affect the job market, because majorly, if I'm to look at, let's take for example the TUC Trade Union Congress.
Don't you think sorry, comrade, let me bring it in here. Don't you think that people would now be leaving private sector jobs to get government work, since government work will pay better? Because people that are exempted, companies that don't employ up to 25 people now, are not supposed to pay this according to at least 2019 minimum wage act, unless if they change it. So people will like, government, they pay better now, so make I go do government work.
Well, if people want to do that, from where I'm talking from the private sector, we've had that, but that has not happened. Because one thing you also know that government work is majorly at that, not at the blue collar level. So yes, government work is majorly not at the blue collar level. I don't think majority of people want to even go to government, go and do the job for government at the blue collar level. Most people want to go to the private sector even at that blue collar level. And if you also look at the government level, you're going to find out that there's also going to be very minimal to see somebody actually earning that 70,000. And then for the private sector, I think one of the reasons why private sector are equally very comfortable with the 70,000 naira minimum wage is that substantially majority of them have actually crossed that threshold of 70,000 naira. Okay. That's why they're very. And you notice they were complaining when others were talking about 100,000. I think the private sector would have had a major problem if it was actually 100,000 naira minimum.
Okay. Wage. So I think we'll leave it at that. DJ, I will hope to bring you back. Let's see if they will bring you people back in the room. We
hope so.
So President and Labour did their own. So I don't know if the president will call you people and do your own. But whatever it is, this conversation is still ongoing. So we'll continue. So I hope soon I will have you back. And comrade, of course, always for your insights. The good old days now, your days now were good old days. And now, from what we're seeing, Nigeria will hail thee. Anyway, that's the much we can take on today's edition of the program. Thank you. I've been speaking to the DG of NECA, Mr. Oyerinde, Adewale Oyerinde, as well as Comrade Peter Esele, the former TUC president. That's the much we can take. Thank you all for joining us. Please join us again tomorrow. Like I mentioned, the MPC meeting on today and tomorrow. We hope to hear from Olayemi Cardoso at the end of tomorrow. Perhaps it will increase interest rates again. That's another thing. The Boala.
And that's another problem.
That's another problem. But I'll see you all again tomorrow. Nancy Naji is my name. Be the best you can be and be the change you want to see by now. Thank you for watching. In case this is your first time watching us, thank you. Don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel, drop your comments as well as like, and most of all, share our content.